My name is Jasper Wilson, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew my brother Marcus better than anyone. A single notification on my phone changed everything. One accidental voice memo revealed the cruel truth, hiding behind years of brotherly smiles. The brother I idolized, who I thought was my biggest supporter, had been secretly undermining me for years. What I heard that morning didn't just break my heart, it ignited something in me. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and stay till the end to see how I turned my brother's betrayal into the best decision of my life. Growing up in our middle-class suburban neighborhood outside Boston, Marcus was everything I wanted to be. 3 years older, taller, more athletic, and seemingly born with an extra dose of confidence that I never quite managed to find. Our childhood home on Maple Street was modest but comfortable. 4 bedrooms, a backyard with a weathered swing set, and a kitchen where our mom spent hours preparing Sunday dinners that brought us all together. As kids, Marcus was my protector. When neighborhood bullies targeted me in elementary school for being the quiet kid, Marcus stepped in. I vividly remember one autumn afternoon when Tommy Pearson pushed me into a puddle, ruining my new sneakers. Before I could even stand up, Marcus appeared like a guardian angel, towering over Tommy with clenched fists and a fierce expression that sent the bully running. That night, as Mom scrubbed the mud from my shoes, Marcus taught me how to throw a proper punch just in case. I never actually needed to use it, but knowing he had my back made me feel invincible. Our father, Robert Wilson, worked as an accountant at a local firm. He was stern but fair, with a dry sense of humor that would unexpectedly crack through his serious demeanor. He taught us about responsibility, saving money, and the importance of education. "Your brain is the one muscle that will never let you down," he'd say, tapping his temple with his index finger. Dad seemed invincible to me until he wasn't. The cancer diagnosis came during my sophomore year of high school. Pancreatic, advanced. Our lives screeched to a halt as hospital visits replaced basketball games and medication schedules became more important than homework. Dad fought hard for 18 months, but I watched him wither away in our living room, set up with a hospital bed and medical equipment that transformed our home into something unrecognizable. I was 16 when he died. Marcus was 19 and in his first year at Boston University. The funeral remains a blur in my memory. Black suits, casseroles brought by neighbors, and the deafening silence that filled our house afterward. What stands out clearly is Marcus standing at our father's graveside, arm wrapped tightly around our mother's shoulders, face set in determination as he whispered to her, "I'll take care of everything." And he did. Marcus stepped into the role of man of the family with a seriousness that aged him overnight. He transferred from Boston University to a community college to save money and be closer to home. He took a job at a local marketing firm while still attending classes, often coming home exhausted but never complaining. When I struggled with college applications, Marcus stayed up late helping me polish my essays. When I got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, he insisted on covering the remaining tuition costs with money he'd been saving. "Dad would want you to focus on your studies, not worry about money," he told me. "Just promise you'll make something of yourself." I majored in computer science, discovering a natural talent for coding that eventually led me to web development. Those 4 years away at college were transformative. I made friends, joined clubs, and even had my first serious relationship. Meanwhile, Marcus had finished his business degree and was rapidly climbing the ranks at the marketing firm. By the time I graduated, he had started his own marketing company, Wilson Media Solutions, which was already securing impressive clients. After graduation, I moved back to Boston, partly because I missed my family and partly because the tech scene was thriving there. I landed a job at a promising startup, creating web applications for small businesses. The pay was decent but not spectacular, especially considering Boston's high cost of living. When I complained about apartment hunting during a family dinner, Marcus immediately offered his guest house. "It's just sitting empty," he said, waving away my protests. "You can stay there while you save up for your own place. No rush." Marcus's house was impressive. a colonial-style four-bedroom in an upscale neighborhood with manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway. The guest house behind the main property was larger than most apartments I could afford. One bedroom, a full kitchen living area, and a small office space perfect for remote work when needed. I gratefully accepted his offer, planning to stay 6 months at most. That was over a year ago. Our weekly family dinners became a ritual every Sunday at Marcus and Natalie's dining table. Mom bringing her famous apple pie, Natalie cooking elaborate meals she learned from cooking shows, and Marcus opening expensive bottles of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. These dinners were filled with laughter, updates about our lives, and occasional reminiscing about Dad. Natalie, Marcus's wife of 3 years, was beautiful, intelligent, and warm. She worked as a pediatric nurse but was considering quitting to start a family. They seemed like the perfect couple, constantly touching, inside jokes flowing between them, finishing each other's sentences. Their relationship made my recent breakup with Rebecca all the more painful. Rebecca and I had dated for 2 years before she ended things, claiming we were moving in different directions. She wanted marriage, a house in the suburbs, stability. I thought we had time to figure things out. The breakup left me questioning my life choices, wondering if I was falling behind where I should be at 28. During these Sunday dinners, the contrast between Marcus and me couldn't have been more obvious. Him, successful business owner, beautiful home, loving marriage, respect in the community. Me, middle-tier developer at a startup that might not survive the next funding round, living in my brother's guest house, single, with savings that wouldn't cover 3 months of rent in a decent Boston apartment. Despite these differences, I never felt judged by Marcus. He seemed genuinely interested in my career, offering connections when possible, listening intently when I explained technical challenges at work. He introduced me as my brilliant brother, the tech genius, to his friends and business associates. When I mentioned wanting to eventually create my own web development agency, he nodded enthusiastically, offering to help with a business plan whenever you're ready. At least that's what I thought, until that Monday morning when everything I believed about our relationship shattered with a single voice memo. Monday morning started like any other. I woke at 6:30, shuffled to the kitchen in the guest house to make coffee, and scrolled through emails while waiting for the caffeine to kick in. The startup I worked for had flexible hours, but I preferred getting in early to enjoy the quiet office before everyone else arrived. I was brushing my teeth when my phone chimed with a notification. A voice memo from Marcus. This wasn't unusual. We often sent voice messages instead of texts, especially when driving or multitasking. Without thinking twice, I tapped play and set the phone on the bathroom counter while continuing my morning routine. "Hey, Mom." Marcus's voice filled the small bathroom. I paused, realizing he'd sent the message to me by mistake. I was about to stop the recording when his next words froze me in place. "Just checking in about dinner on Sunday. Natalie's making her lasagna." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Also, we need to talk about Jasper again. This situation with him living in the guest house is getting ridiculous." My hand hovered over the phone, heart suddenly pounding. I should stop listening, I thought. This wasn't meant for me, but I couldn't move. It's been over a year now. A year. And he's made zero progress on moving out. At this point, he's just a freeloader, taking advantage of us. Marcus's voice had taken on an edge I'd rarely heard before. I know you're going to defend him like you always do. Poor Jasper needs time. Jasper's still finding himself. Mom, he's 28 years old. I had my own company at his age. I sank down onto the edge of the bathtub, toothbrush still in my mouth, foam dripping unnoticed onto my shirt. The truth is, he's a disappointment. Dad would be so let down if he could see how Jasper turned out. No ambition, no drive, content to coast through life taking handouts. The toothbrush fell from my hand, clattering against the tile floor. That startup job is a joke. He could be making twice as much if he applied himself. Remember when Thompson Industries was looking for a web developer, I actually told Brad Thompson not to hire him. Said Jasper wasn't reliable. Why? Because he needs to struggle a bit to finally grow up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Marcus had sabotaged a job opportunity for me. My mind raced back to the interview with Thompson Industries 6 months ago. It had gone incredibly well. Brad Thompson himself said he was impressed with my portfolio. Then suddenly radio silence. When I finally received a rejection email, it mentioned concerns about reliability as the deciding factor. I'd been confused and devastated, spending weeks analyzing what I could have said during the interview to give that impression. And that's not the only time Marcus continued, his voice now lower, conspiratorial. Remember that business idea he had about creating websites for local restaurants? I convinced him the market was saturated. Truth is, it was a decent idea, but if he succeeded, he'd move out and lose his dependence on me. My mother's voice came through faintly in the background, though I couldn't make out her words clearly. "Don't give me that, Mom," Marcus responded. "You know I'm right. Jasper needs to learn responsibility. He's been the baby of the family for too long, always getting special treatment, especially after Dad died. Well, I'm done enabling him. Natalie and I want to start a family soon, and we could use that guest house for her mother when she visits to help with the baby." More muffled words from my mother. "Fine, fine," Marcus said, sounding irritated. "We'll give him until the end of the year. But I'm telling you, if we don't push him out of the nest, he'll never fly. He's just not like me, Mom. He doesn't have what it takes to be truly successful. He's mediocre at best, and the sooner he accepts that and finds a stable, ordinary job that matches his abilities, the better off he'll be." The recording cut off abruptly. I sat frozen on the edge of the bathtub, toothpaste now dried around my mouth, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Mediocre, freeloader, disappointment. The words echoed in my head, each one a physical blow. My stomach clenched painfully, and for a moment I thought I might throw up. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in as my breathing became shallow and rapid. With shaking hands, I replayed the message, desperate to have misheard, to have misunderstood. But the second listen was even worse, allowing me to catch nuances I'd missed initially: the contemptuous laugh when mentioning my job, the casual admission of sabotage, the absolute certainty in his voice when declaring me mediocre. I called my office with a voice I barely recognized as my own, claiming food poisoning. My boss, concerned by how terrible I sounded, told me to take the day and feel better. If only he knew that what was poisoning me couldn't be cured by rest and fluids. The betrayal wasn't just in the words, but in the realization that the relationship I'd valued my entire life had been a facade. Every encouragement, every supportive conversation, every bit of advice, all potentially tainted by this hidden contempt. How long had he felt this way? Had he always seen me as lesser, as a burden? Was anything between us real? I stumbled back to bed, still in my work clothes, and curled into a ball under the covers. The brother I thought would do anything for me had been actively working against me. The person I trusted most in the world saw me as nothing but a disappointment and a freeloader. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered the most painful question of all. What if he was right? For hours I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the voice memo playing on repeat in my head. The sunlight shifted across the room as morning turned to afternoon, but I barely noticed. My phone buzzed, occasionally work emails, a text from a coworker, checking if I was okay, a message from Marcus asking if I wanted to grab lunch later in the week. The irony of that last one almost made me laugh. Almost. Around 2 o'clock, I finally dragged myself up and into the shower, as if water could somehow wash away what I'd heard. Standing under the spray, I began mentally reviewing my interactions with Marcus over the past few years, examining them with new suspicious eyes. There was the time I'd applied for a senior developer position at a major tech company in Boston. Marcus had offered to put in a good word through a college friend who worked there. The interview went well, but I never heard back. When I asked Marcus if his friend had mentioned anything, he shrugged and said, "These big companies get hundreds of applications. Don't take it personally." Then there was my idea for a web development business focused on restaurants and small food businesses. I'd been excited noticing how many local eateries had outdated, non-mobile-friendly websites. I'd already created mock-ups and pricing structures when I shared the idea with Marcus over beers. He spent the entire evening pointing out potential problems: market saturation, difficulty getting clients, the stress of running a business. By the end of the night, my excitement had deflated completely. I shelved the idea, believing my big brother knew best. Most recently, I'd mentioned applying for a remote position with a tech company in Chicago, higher pay, better benefits opportunity for advancement. Marcus had frowned, asking, "But what about being close to family? Mom needs us nearby, you know that." The guilt had been immediate, and I withdrew my application the next day. Each memory now carried a sinister undertone. Had these been genuine concerns from a caring brother, or calculated moves to keep me dependent and nearby? The uncertainty was maddening. By 4 o'clock, I couldn't bear my own thoughts anymore. I called Ethan, my best friend since college, who now lived across town. "You sound like hell," he said after I greeted him. "Feel worse," I replied. "Can you come over? I need to talk to someone." Ethan arrived 45 minutes later with a six-pack of beer and a concerned expression. We sat on the small porch of the guest house as I played him the voice memo. His face darkened with each word, jaw clenching visibly. When it finished, he shook his head slowly. "Man, I wish I could say I'm surprised." I looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" Ethan took a long swig of beer before answering. "I've never liked Marcus, you know that." "Yeah, but I always thought that was just because of that argument you had at my graduation party." "It wasn't just that." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I never told you because he's your brother and you idolize him, but Marcus has always talked about you differently when you're not around." The cold feeling in my stomach intensified. "What kind of differently?" "Like diminishing you. At your graduation party, when you were busy with your parents, he was telling people how he was still supporting his little brother, and how not everyone has what it takes to make it on their own. He made it sound like you were some charity case. He was generously helping, not a college graduate with a tech degree." I stared at my beer bottle, processing this new information. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Every time I tried to suggest Marcus wasn't perfect, you'd get defensive. He's your big brother, your hero." I didn't want to be the one to burst that bubble. He was right. I wouldn't have believed him. Part of me still didn't want to believe it now, despite the evidence literally in my own hands. "There's more," Ethan continued reluctantly. "Last year at that industry mixer, you know, the one Marcus invited us both to, I overheard him talking to some business guy. The guy asked if you could help with his company's website, and Marcus said something like, 'Jasper's still pretty junior. I wouldn't trust him with anything important yet.' Then he recommended someone else." Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of my relationship with Marcus. The brother I thought I knew was disappearing, replaced by a manipulative stranger who had been controlling my life from the shadows. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked, more to myself than to Ethan. "Confront him," Ethan said immediately. "Call him out on his bullshit. Play him the memo." The idea sent a surge of adrenaline through me. I imagined the satisfaction of seeing Marcus's face when he realized he'd been caught, the stammered excuses, the forced apologies. But as quickly as the fantasy formed, it dissolved. "He'd just manipulate the situation," I said slowly. "He'd claim he was trying to motivate me, or that I misunderstood, or that he was having a bad day. And Mom would probably take his side. You heard him. She always defends him." "So what then?" "You just pretend you never heard it. Keep living in his guest house, letting him sabotage your life." "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I'm done being manipulated. I'm done being the family charity case. But I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of an emotional confrontation where he can twist things around." The anger that had been building all day was crystallizing into something colder, more focused. For the first time, I was seeing Marcus clearly, not as my protective older brother, but as someone who needed to keep me down to feel superior. "I need to leave," I said. "Tomorrow. But not just leave, I need a plan. Something he won't see coming." Ethan raised his eyebrows. "That doesn't sound like you." You're usually the forgive and forget type. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it's time I stopped being so predictable. As the sun set, Ethan and I talked through possibilities. The hurt was still raw, but it was increasingly overshadowed by determination. I wouldn't just run away hurt. I would rebuild my life on my own terms. And eventually, when I was ready, Marcus would have to face the consequences of his betrayal. By the time Ethan left around 10, the outline of a plan was forming in my mind. I wouldn't just be leaving the guest house. I would be leaving behind the version of myself that Marcus had so carefully cultivated, the dependent younger brother who couldn't succeed without his guidance. That night, as I lay in bed wide awake, I made a promise to myself this would be the last night I spent living in my brother's shadow. Sleep was impossible. By midnight, I was sitting at my desk with a notepad, the blue glow of my laptop screen illuminating the otherwise dark room. If I was going to leave, I needed to be smart about it. This wasn't just an emotional reaction, it was a life reset. First, I needed a place to go. Staying in Boston wasn't an option. Too easy for Marcus to find me, too many connections to my current life. Chicago immediately came to mind. Ryan Matthews, my college roommate and close friend, had been trying to convince me to move there for years. The tech scene was thriving. Cost of living was lower than Boston, and most importantly, it was far enough away to make a clean break. I sent Ryan a text despite the late hour. Need a huge favor. Can I crash at your place for a while? We'll explain everything when I see you. His response came surprisingly quickly. Doors always open for you. Everything okay? Not really. We'll tell you when I get there. Planning to drive out tomorrow. Serious. That soon. Guest room is yours for as long as you need. Call me when you're on the road. With temporary housing secured, I turned to finances. Opening my banking app, I checked my savings, $22,000. Not a fortune, but enough to support myself for a few months while job hunting if necessary. I made a mental note to withdraw it all in cash tomorrow. I wouldn't put it past Marcus to somehow access my accounts if he realized what I was doing. Next came the most uncomfortable part of my plan. I navigated to the admin panel of Wilson Media Solutions' website. As the developer who'd built and maintained it, I still had back-end access. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I needed leverage. For the next 3 hours, I downloaded financial records, client contracts, email exchanges, and internal documents. I wasn't looking for anything specific at first, just gathering information that might prove useful. But around 2 in the morning, I found something interesting: discrepancies in the accounting records, large client payments that didn't match the service contracts, expenses categorized in ways that seemed designed to hide their true nature. I wasn't an accountant like my father had been, but even I could tell something wasn't right. Further digging revealed emails between Marcus and his business partner Alex about creative bookkeeping and tax strategies that sounded suspiciously like fraud. Then I found something even more damning: a series of emails from 5 years ago between Marcus and a client named Jefferson Media. Jefferson had been a major client of Marcus's previous employer, Apex Marketing. The emails clearly showed Marcus secretly meeting with Jefferson while still employed at Apex, offering to take their account with him to his new company for a reduced rate. This wasn't just unethical. It potentially violated the non-solicitation agreement I knew Marcus had signed with Apex. I created a secure cloud folder and uploaded everything, then removed all traces of my access from the system. This wasn't about revenge, it was insurance. If Marcus came after me, I needed protection. By 3 in the morning, I was packing. I decided to travel: light clothes, laptop, important documents, and a few sentimental items. Everything else could be replaced. I made a list of things to do in the morning. 1. Withdraw all savings in cash. 2. Buy a prepaid phone. 3. Write letter to mom. 4. Cancel automatic payments linked to current accounts. 5. Call Greg Thompson for legal advice. Greg Thompson had been a family friend and my father's colleague before retiring from law practice. He had always been kind to me, and more importantly, he was one of the few people I knew who wasn't completely charmed by Marcus. The sky was beginning to lighten when I finally took a break. My eyes burned from staring at screens all night, but my mind was clearer than it had been all day. For the first time since hearing the voice memo, I felt a sense of control returning. I managed a few hours of fitful sleep before my alarm jolted me awake at 7. I showered and dressed quickly, then headed to the bank when it opened at 9. The teller raised her eyebrows when I asked to withdraw my entire savings account in cash, but didn't question it further. Next, I stopped at an electronics store for a prepaid phone. I would keep my regular phone active temporarily to avoid raising suspicions, but I needed a separate line Marcus couldn't track. Around 11, I called Greg Thompson for my new phone. "Jasper, is that you?" Didn't recognize the number his gruff voice answered. "Yes, sir. Sorry to call out of the blue. I need some advice if you have time. For Robert's son, always. What's going on?" I gave him a condensed version of the situation, including the voice memo and what I discovered about Marcus's business practices. I left out my snooping through the company records, simply saying I'd become aware of concerning financial practices. Greg was silent for a long moment after I finished. Finally, he sighed heavily. "I wish I could say I'm surprised about Marcus. Your father and I used to discuss our concerns about him, his need to be the big shot, the shortcuts he'd take. Robert hoped he'd grow out of it. This was news to me. Dad was worried about Marcus. Your father was perceptive about people, especially his own children. He saw Marcus's tendencies and your admiration for your brother. He actually asked me to keep an eye on you after he was gone, make sure Marcus didn't do exactly what he's been doing." I felt a pang of grief mixed with gratitude. Even while dying, my father had been trying to protect me. "What should I do, Greg? About the business stuff, I mean. Should I report him?" "Not yet," Greg advised. "What you've described could be serious tax fraud, client theft, but without proper evidence, it's your word against his. For now, focus on establishing your independence. Get away, build your own life. If Marcus escalates things or tries to harm you further, then we can discuss legal options. And what about confronting him? Letting him know I heard everything. What would that accomplish right now? He'd deny, minimize, turn it around on you. Get yourself settled first. Build from a position of strength, not hurt. When you do confront him, if you choose to do it on your terms, not his." Greg's advice aligned with my instincts. Before ending the call, he gave me the name of a lawyer friend in Chicago and made me promise to check in once I was settled. Back at the guest house, I wrote a brief letter to my mother. I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the voice memo or my discoveries about Marcus's business. It would devastate her, and I wasn't certain whose side she would take. Instead, I explained that I needed space to figure out my life independently, that I was safe but wouldn't be in contact for a while, and that I loved her despite the distance I was creating. As I finished packing my car, I received an email notification for a job I'd applied to weeks ago, a remote senior developer position with a tech firm called Innovate Solutions. They wanted to schedule a video interview. The timing couldn't have been better. I quickly responded, setting up an interview for later in the week. By 3 in the afternoon, everything was ready. I took one final look around the guest house that had been my home for the past year. Despite the circumstances, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was truly mine. I locked the door, left the key on the kitchen counter, and drove away without looking back. My brother had severely underestimated me. The mediocre younger brother he'd been so carefully controlling was about to disappear, and in his place would emerge someone Marcus had never allowed me to become. The drive to Chicago took 16 hours spread over 2 days. I could have done it faster, but I deliberately took my time stopping at roadside diners and scenic overlooks, savoring the sense of freedom that grew with each mile between me and Boston. I kept my regular phone on, but silenced, watching notifications accumulate. 3 texts from Marcus, asking about casual things, a missed call from my mother, work emails I'd have to address soon. Around noon on the second day, my regular phone rang with Marcus's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message at my next rest stop. "Hey, Jasp, just checking in. Stopped by the guest house to drop off that book I mentioned, but you weren't there. Give me a call when you get a chance." His voice sounded completely normal, warm, casual, concerned. The same voice that had called me a disappointment and a freeloader. The disconnect was jarring. By evening, the calls had become more frequent. I finally sent a brief text. "Needed some space. Took a trip. We'll be in touch later." His response was immediate. "What? Where did you go? Is everything okay?" I didn't reply. Let him wonder for a change. I reached Ryan's apartment in Chicago as the sun was setting. He lived in a converted warehouse in West Loop, exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and large windows overlooking the city. When I knocked, he opened the door with a concerned expression that quickly turned to shock as he took in my exhausted appearance and the single suitcase at my feet. "You really weren't kidding," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Come in, man. You look like you've been through hell." That night, over beers and takeout, I told Ryan everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Your brother's a sociopath," he declared when I finished. "You know that, right?" I winced at the harshness of the assessment, but couldn't entirely disagree. He's definitely not who I thought he was. "Well, his loss is Chicago's gain," Ryan said, raising his bottle in a toast. "To new beginnings." The guest room in Ryan's apartment was small but comfortable. That night I slept better than I had since hearing the voice memo. The next morning I woke to more missed calls and increasingly frantic texts from Marcus. My mother had also called twice and left a voicemail asking if I was okay. I sent her a brief reassurance that I was safe and would explain everything soon, but I needed some time. To Marcus I sent only, "I'm fine, need space. Don't contact me for a while." His response came immediately. "What the hell, Jasper? You can't just disappear without explanation. Mom's worried sick. Where are you?" I turned off that phone and focused on my new one. I had the video interview with Innovate Solutions in 2 hours, and preparation was a welcome distraction from family drama. The interview went surprisingly well. The company was larger than my previous startup with offices in multiple cities, but a strong remote work culture. They needed someone to lead a team developing web applications for healthcare providers. The salary they mentioned was nearly double what I'd been making in Boston. I tried not to sound too eager, but by the end of the interview, I had a good feeling about my chances. 2 days later, they called with an offer. I accepted immediately. The next few weeks passed in a blur of productivity. I found a month-to-month furnished apartment within walking distance of Ryan's place. I set up my home office, began work with my new company, and started exploring Chicago. Ryan introduced me to his friend group, and I found myself actually enjoying social gatherings for the first time in years. No longer the awkward younger brother tagging along, but just Jasper, the new guy from Boston with a dry sense of humor and a talent for mixing drinks. Marcus's attempts to contact me continued, but became less frequent as weeks passed. My mother was more persistent, so I maintained minimal contact with her, assuring her I was well but avoiding details about my location or situation. I knew Marcus would be pumping her for information. In my 3rd week in Chicago, Ryan invited me to a gallery opening. His friend was showcasing photography, and there would be free wine and interesting people. Normally, I would have declined art galleries, had never been my scene, but my new policy was saying yes to experiences outside my comfort zone. The gallery was a converted industrial space with concrete floors and stark white walls covered in large black and white photographs of urban landscapes. As I sipped mediocre white wine from a plastic cup, I found myself genuinely appreciating the stark beauty of the images. "They're incredible, aren't they?" a voice said beside me. I turned to find a woman studying the same photograph, a striking shot of an abandoned subway station reclaimed by nature roots and vines threading through broken tiles. "They are," I agreed. "Makes me see the city differently." She smiled, extending her hand. I'm Harper Mitchell, friend of the photographer. Jasper Wilson, friend of the photographer. Harper had dark curly hair cut in a short style that framed an expressive face, bright green eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses, and a quick, genuine smile. She was a graphic designer who had moved to Chicago from Seattle 2 years ago. Our conversation flowed easily from photography to design to our favorite spots in the city. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers with plans to meet for coffee. Coffee turned into dinner, dinner into weekend explorations of Chicago neighborhoods, and soon we were seeing each other regularly. Harper was creative, independent, and refreshingly direct. She didn't play games or send mixed signals, and she listened intently when I gradually shared pieces of my Boston life and my complicated relationship with my brother. She never pushed for details I wasn't ready to share, but offered unwavering support when I did open up. Meanwhile, my professional life was thriving. The remote position allowed me flexibility while challenging me technically. My team was talented and collaborative, and my manager regularly praised my contributions. For the first time, I was being valued for my actual abilities, not measured against my brother's expectations. As months passed, my new life in Chicago solidified. I found a permanent apartment in a neighborhood I loved. I made friends beyond Ryan's circle. I started a small side project developing a specialized web application for independent restaurants, the very business idea Marcus had discouraged me from pursuing. Marcus's communication attempts had dwindled to occasional texts that I rarely answered. My mother had accepted my need for space, though I could hear the hurt in her voice during our brief calls. I knew eventually I would need to have a more honest conversation with her, but I wasn't ready yet. 6 months after leaving Boston, I received an unexpected email from Alex Reed, Marcus's business partner. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk." The message was brief. "Jasper, things at WMS are complicated right now. Marcus won't say what happened between you two, but whatever it is, I think you should know some things. Call me if you're willing to talk." I stared at the email for a long time, considering my options. Finally, I called Alex from my new phone. "Jasper," he answered immediately. "Honestly, wasn't sure you'd call back." "What's going on, Alex?" He sighed heavily. "There's no easy way to say this. The company's in trouble. We're being audited by the IRS, Marcus Island. Not handling it well." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, though I had a good idea. "The kind that comes with serious penalties. Look, I know you and Marcus had some kind of falling out, but I thought you should know. He's been drinking too much, lashing out. Natalie called me worried the other day. Said he's obsessed with finding you, convinced somehow that you're behind this." I wasn't behind the audit, but I couldn't say I was entirely surprised by it. Marcus's creative bookkeeping had been bound to catch up with him eventually. "Why are you telling me this, Alex?" "Because, despite everything, you're his brother, and because—" He hesitated. "I think you might be the only person who can get through to him right now. He needs to cooperate with the investigation, be transparent. Instead, he's talking about fighting it, hiding assets. It's going to make everything worse." I thanked Alex for the information, but made no promises about contacting Marcus. After hanging up, I sat at my window overlooking the Chicago skyline, contemplating my next move. 6 months ago, I'd fled Boston hurt and angry, focused only on escaping Marcus's influence. I'd succeeded beyond my expectations, building a life I was proud of, one entirely my own. Now, I had a choice: continue forward without looking back, or return to confront the past I'd left behind. Harper found me still sitting by the window an hour later when she arrived for our dinner plans. "Heavy thoughts?" she asked, perching beside me. I showed her the email from Alex and summarized our conversation. "What do you want to do?" she asked simply. "Part of me wants to ignore it completely. Let him deal with the consequences of his actions without me involved. And the other part," I sighed, "the other part knows this isn't just about Marcus anymore. Mom's caught in the middle. If his company crashes and burns, it affects other people too. employees, clients. Harper took my hand. For what it's worth, I think you already know what you need to do. Not for him, but for yourself. You've spent 6 months building a new life, finding your strength. Maybe now you're strong enough to face what you left behind on your terms this time. She was right. The wound of Marcus's betrayal had healed into a scar still visible but no longer raw and painful. I had proven to myself that I didn't need his approval or support to succeed. Now it was time to close this chapter properly face to face. That night I booked a flight to Boston for the following weekend. It was time to confront my brother with the truth, both his and mine. The flight to Boston felt surreal, like traveling backward in time. As the plane descended through clouds revealing the familiar cityscape, I experienced a strange disconnect. This place that had been my entire world for so long now felt like a distant memory. I had arranged to meet Marcus at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory, public enough to discourage a scene but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived 30 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. My hands were steady as I ordered a black coffee, but my heartbeat quickened when I spotted Marcus through the window approaching from the street. He looked different somehow. The confident stride, less pronounced dark circles under his eyes, his typically impeccable appearance slightly rumpled. He scanned the room as he entered, and the flash of emotions across his face when he spotted me was telling relief, anger, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. "Jasper," he said, sliding into the seat across from me, "you look good." "Thanks," I replied simply. "How are you, Marcus?" "How am I?" His voice rose slightly before he caught himself glancing around the cafe. "You disappear for 6 months with barely a word, and that's your question. Where the hell have you been? What happened?" I studied him calmly. "I think you know what happened. Check your sent voice memos from April 12th. His brow furrowed momentarily before understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by a flush of color across his face. "The message to Mom," he said quietly. "Yes, the one where you called me a freeloader, a disappointment, mediocre, where you admitted to sabotaging job opportunities for me. That message." Marcus's expression shifted rapidly through shock, embarrassment, and calculation before settling on contrition. "Jasper, you have to understand I was frustrated that day. I didn't mean—" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice level but firm. "Don't insult me by lying. Not anymore." He fell silent, the practiced explanation dying on his lips. "I didn't come here for apologies or excuses," I continued. "I came because it's time for both of us to face the truth. All of it." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, wariness creeping into his tone. "It means I know about the creative bookkeeping at Wilson Media Solutions. I know about Jefferson Media and how you stole them from Apex in violation of your contract. I know about the tax issues that have the IRS investigating you right now." Marcus's face drained of color. "How could you possibly—" "That doesn't matter," I cut him off. "What matters is what happens next." For the first time in my life, I saw my older brother completely off balance. The power dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood had reversed entirely. I was no longer the admiring younger brother seeking his approval. I was a man confronting another man's betrayal and misconduct. "Are you blackmailing me?" Marcus finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question might have angered me 6 months ago. Now it just confirmed how little he understood me. "No, Marcus. I'm offering you a choice. You can make things right, or you can face the consequences. It's more than you ever gave me." "Make things right, how?" I laid out my terms clearly. He would come clean to our mother about the voice memo and his pattern of sabotaging me. He would properly account for his business practices and make restitution to any clients he had overcharged. He would acknowledge his wrongdoing to me directly, without excuses or deflection. And if I refuse, he asked, a hint of his old defiance returning. "Then everything I know goes to the IRS, to Apex Marketing, to every client you've overcharged," I replied evenly. "I don't want to do that, Marcus. Despite everything, you're still my brother. But I won't protect you from the consequences of your actions if you refuse to take responsibility for them. You wouldn't, he challenged, but uncertainty wavered in his voice. The brother you thought you knew, wouldn't, I agreed. The one who idolized you and desperately sought your approval. But that's not who I am anymore. You made sure of that. We stared at each other across the table, the weight of decades of brotherhood, love, resentment, and betrayal hanging between us. Finally, Marcus looked away. You've changed, he said quietly. I had to. I never meant. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said, running a hand through his hair. I was trying to protect you in my way. By undermining me, by actively preventing me from succeeding. By keeping you close, he admitted. After Dad died, I promised I'd look after you and Mom. I thought that meant keeping us all together, keeping you dependent on me so you wouldn't leave. It got twisted somewhere along the way. I can see that now. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was perhaps as close to honest self-reflection as Marcus was capable of at that moment. I'll do it, he said finally. All of it. Just give me some time to figure out how to approach the business issues. The IRS is already investigating, so that's happening regardless. 1 week, I said firmly. Starting with Mom. Today. He nodded slowly, resignation settling over his features. She's expecting me for dinner tonight. Come with me. Let's tell her together. I hadn't planned on seeing our mother during this trip, uncertain if I was ready for that conversation. But Marcus's suggestion made sense. It would be harder for him to manipulate the narrative with me present. All right, I agreed. But you lead the conversation. This is your responsibility to address, not mine. We parted ways with plans to meet at our mother's house that evening. As I watched Marcus walk away, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt no satisfaction or vindication, only a complicated mixture of sadness and relief. The brother I had idolized didn't exist, and mourning that loss would take time. But maybe eventually we could build something new in its place, something authentic with clear eyes and honest hearts. My mother's reaction to seeing me on her doorstep was everything I'd both hoped for, and dreaded: tears, hugs, rapid-fire questions, and gentle reproaches for my long absence. I let her express it all before guiding her to the living room where Marcus waited, tension evident in every line of his body. What's going on? She asked, looking between us. You're both acting strange. Marcus took a deep breath and began speaking. He explained about the voice memo, not sparing himself as he recounted the hurtful things he'd said. He confessed to interfering with my job prospects and discouraging my business ideas. He admitted to the resentment and control that had motivated his actions. Mom listened in stunned silence, her expression cycling through disbelief, hurt, and anger. When Marcus finished, she asked quietly, "Is this why you left Jasper?" I nodded. I needed to find out who I could be without. Interference. "And have you?" she asked, a mother's perception cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "I'm working on it," I answered honestly. "I have a good job in Chicago, friends, a life I'm building for myself." "Chicago," she repeated softly. "That's where you've been." I explained briefly about my new position, my apartment even mentioned. Harper watching my mother absorb each detail of the life I'd built without her knowledge. "I should have told you sooner," I acknowledged. "I just needed complete separation at first, and then it became harder to bridge the gap the longer I waited." She nodded, then turned to Marcus with an expression I'd rarely seen her direct at her eldest son disappointment. "I raised you both better than this," she said firmly. "Marcus, what you did was manipulative and cruel, and Jasper disappearing without explanation was hurtful to me, whatever your justification." She was right, of course. In focusing on my brother's betrayal, I had overlooked how my response had hurt her. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said sincerely. "I should have handled it differently with you." Marcus apologized as well, looking genuinely remorseful for perhaps the first time in our conversation. Mom sighed deeply. "Family is complicated. Your father used to say that all the time. But complicated doesn't mean disposable. We work through the complications together honestly. The conversation continued late into the evening, painful but necessary. Mom asked to hear the voice memo, and though I was reluctant to cause her more pain, I played it. The hurt in her eyes was evident, but so was her resilience, as she addressed Marcus's claims that she always took my side. "I have never played favorites," she said firmly. "I've tried to give each of you what you needed. Marcus, you needed confidence and independence, which came naturally to you. Jasper needed encouragement and space to find his way, which took longer. That's not favoritism, that's recognizing you're different people." By the time I left my mother's house that night, something had shifted, not healed completely, but perhaps beginning to mend. Mom extracted promises from both of us to maintain better communication, regardless of our issues with each other. And as Marcus and I stood awkwardly on the porch saying goodbye, there was an unspoken acknowledgement that while our relationship would never be what it once was, it might eventually become something more authentic. "For what it's worth," Marcus said quietly, "I am sorry, and I'm proud of what you've accomplished, on your own." The words I had once desperately craved now felt strangely hollow, yet I appreciated the effort behind them. "Thank you," I replied simply. "I'll be watching to make sure you follow through on everything we discussed." As I drove back to my hotel, the city lights of Boston reflecting on wet pavement after a brief evening shower, I felt a weight lifting. I had confronted my past without being consumed by it. Tomorrow, I would fly back to Chicago, back to the life I was building, not running away this time, but moving forward with purpose. 3 months after my confrontation with Marcus, I sat on my balcony in Chicago, enjoying the warm summer evening with Harper beside me. My laptop was open to a video call with my mother, who was providing weekly updates on her garden and neighborhood gossip. "Oh, and Marcus stopped by yesterday," she mentioned casually. "He brought the financial documents I asked for. My taxes are getting complicated with the retirement account distributions." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. In the months since our confrontation, Marcus had been making efforts to follow through on his promises. He had cooperated with the IRS investigation, resulting in significant penalties but no criminal charges. He had reached out to clients he had overcharged and worked out restitution plans. His company had downsized considerably, moving to a smaller office and losing some key clients, but it survived. Our relationship remained complicated. We spoke occasionally, brief conversations focused primarily on practical matters. The easy brotherhood of our childhood was gone forever, replaced by something more cautious and limited. But it was honest, and that counted for something. "How was he doing?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Better, I think," Mom replied. "More humble. Natalie's pregnancy has given him something positive to focus on." The news that I would be an uncle had come as a surprise. Despite everything, I found myself looking forward to meeting my niece or nephew, hoping the child would bring out better qualities in Marcus than he had shown to me. After finishing the call with Mom, Harper and I walked to our favorite neighborhood restaurant, a small Italian place with outdoor seating and string lights that created pools of golden illumination in the gathering dusk. As we settled in with glasses of wine, I reflected on how much had changed in the past 9 months. My life in Chicago had flourished beyond my expectations. My work with Innovate Solutions had led to a promotion to lead developer with a team of 5 reporting to me. The restaurant web application side project had grown into a viable business with 20 clients and counting. I had signed a lease on a larger apartment in a neighborhood I loved. And most significantly, my relationship with Harper had deepened into something that felt like it might last a lifetime. "You're quiet tonight," Harper observed, reaching across the table to take my hand. Anniversary reflections. She was right. It had been exactly 1 year since the voice memo that changed everything. I'd marked the date in my mind without consciously planning to. Just thinking about how different things were a year ago, I admitted. How different I was. "Regrets?" she asked, her green eyes searching mine. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "Pain, yes. Disappointment in someone I trusted absolutely, but no regrets. Everything that happened led me here to this life, to you. Harper smiled, squeezing my hand. For what it's worth, I like this version of Jasper Wilson, the one who stands up for himself, the one who knows his worth. I'm still working on that part, I acknowledged. Decades of seeing yourself through someone else's diminishing lens doesn't disappear overnight. But it's fading, she noted. I've seen the change since I met you. You second-guess yourself less. You take up space more confidently. She was right. The voice in my head that questioned my abilities, that compared me unfavorably to Marcus, had grown quieter over the months. It still whispered occasionally in moments of doubt, but it no longer controlled my decisions or defined my self-worth. The holiday season brought another test, a family gathering at my mother's house that would include Marcus, Natalie, and their newborn son Robert, named after our father. I flew to Boston with Harper, who insisted on supporting me through what would inevitably be an emotionally complex visit. The reunion was neither as awkward as I feared, nor as easy as I might have hoped. Marcus and I maintained a cordial distance, engaging in surface-level conversations about work and current events. We both doted on baby Robert, finding common ground in our love for the newest member of our family. Mom watched us carefully, hope and worry mingling in her expression. On our last evening in Boston, Marcus approached me while I was alone in the kitchen washing dishes after dinner. "Can we talk?" he asked, picking up a dish towel to dry the plates I had washed. I nodded, continuing with the task at hand. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said after a moment, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Trying to understand why I treated you the way I did." I glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "It goes back to when Dad died," he continued. "I was terrified of failing him. He put all this responsibility on me: take care of Mom, look after Jasper, be the man of the family. I was 19 and suddenly felt like I had to be perfect, had to control everything." He dried a glass methodically, not meeting my eyes. "When you started succeeding on your own, making your own decisions, it felt like you were rejecting my guidance, like you didn't need me. And instead of being proud, I felt threatened." It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, possibly ever. I wasn't ready to forgive completely, but I recognized the courage it took for him to acknowledge these truths. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said carefully. "It helps me understand, but trust takes time to rebuild." I know he nodded. "I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. I just want a chance to be a better brother going forward, and a good uncle to any kids you might have someday." We finished the dishes in companionable silence, a small step toward a new kind of relationship, one based on who we actually were, rather than the roles we had played for each other. Returning to Chicago after the holidays, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for a long time. The betrayal that had once consumed my thoughts had transformed into something less, defining a painful chapter in my story, but no longer the central plot. The lessons I had learned through this ordeal were numerous and profound. Trust must be earned continuously, not granted blindly based on blood ties or past relationships. The people closest to us can sometimes wound us most deeply, often motivated by their own insecurities and fears. True strength comes not from controlling others, but from having the courage to stand alone when necessary. I learned that sometimes loving family means maintaining healthy distance rather than toxic proximity. That success built on your own terms brings a satisfaction that external validation never could. That confrontation doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it clears the ground for something more authentic to grow. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or excusing. It simply means refusing to let another person's actions determine your path forward. Marcus would always be my brother, but he would never again have the power to define my worth or limit my potential. 6 months later, as Harper and I became engaged and I prepared to launch my restaurant web platform as a full-fledged business, I received a text from Marcus with a link to an industry publication. His company had been featured in an article about businesses that had successfully restructured after financial challenges. The final paragraph quoted Marcus. The past year taught me valuable lessons about integrity in business and personal relationships. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to recognize what truly matters. I'm grateful for the opportunity to rebuild on a stronger foundation of honesty and accountability. I smiled at the subtle acknowledgement of our shared history and the changes it had prompted in both our lives. Without the pain of betrayal, I might never have discovered my own strength. Without the shock of consequences, Marcus might never have confronted his flaws. As difficult as that journey had been, I wouldn't change it. That accidental voice memo, words never meant for my ears, had ultimately set me free. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted, I hope my story reminds you that such moments don't define you, your response to them does. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a major betrayal? What helped you move forward? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming life's challenges. Your support means everything, and I'm grateful for each of you who took the time to listen to my journey. Remember, sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most necessary growth. Until next time, this is Jasper Wilson, signing off.